to D&D Beyond. I am Amy Dallen, and today we are going to prepare ourselves for adventure in a little bit of a different way than we've done here before. We're still talking about the Feywild because we are so excited for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the next adventure book that's going to be coming our way. But rather than talking about the lore of the Feywild and the land itself, as we did in our travel guide, we want to talk about who you might want to be when you head to the Feywild. And to help us do that, I have called in an expert, the author of a wonderful article you can read right now on ddbeyond.com, Survive the Feywild with These 6 Subclasses. Please welcome back DeAngelo Murillo.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is DeAngelo Murillo, and I do a lot of tabletop RPG, performances, host a lot of events for like Wounded Warrior Project and a bunch of other things to help our community with diversity and inclusion and everything. And it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you could come back because I hadn't had the chance to meet you yet. Although, of course, this is not your first time on the channel. But I loved this whole approach. Like I said, we've been talking about the features of the Feywild, what we learn about it in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the bits of lore that we have about the various courts, about the dangers you might face there. But one of the things that's sprinkled throughout so much of 5th edition, there's little bits of Feywild lore hiding inside the mechanics, inside the player options, spread across a bunch of different books in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We get all of these either dedicated or just really helpful sounding subclasses that relate to the Feywild. So first off, I wanted to ask, what was your sort of big broad take when you were picking out faves that might make a good match for the environment of the Feywild?
Yeah, so when it comes to the other like planes, like the like Shadowfell, upper planes, lower planes, all that kind of stuff, it's like approachable because you kind of know like, all right, there's probably bad stuff in the Shadowfell, and there's probably some other stuff, whatever. But the Feywild is one that really trips me up, because when I think of the Feywild, it's like Alice in Wonderland or like Willy Wonka, where it's just chaos. You don't know if these are friends or if these are enemies and all that kind of stuff. So I always think of like, if I were to be like in Willy Wonka's presence or trapped in that world, what would I want at my side? And it's probably like a little bit of chaos to combat that other chaos. So it's like, that's what I always think of. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to quickly get over the idea that think about how would you defend yourself against Willy Wonka or proceed through that environment? That's incredible Feywild navigation advice that I have never considered before.
Yep. Oh my god, it's
All
so
right.
good. Yes.
So if you are putting together a party to head into the Feywild, you have multiple options, and this is sort of just a larger philosophical question for building a D&D party because it is very fun to tailor a party exactly for the challenges you think you're going to meet, but it is also fun to do the opposite and run a party of people who will be completely out of their depth. And so it's sort of I love thinking in terms of, if you're going to meet a bunch of the undead, do you make sure that you've got your clerics and paladins handy? Or do you try to run we have none of that, try your luck, oh my gosh, I hope we make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're both kind of fun approaches, but I feel like what I love about this article is if you've decided, no, let's recruit the experts, let's figure out what's really going to be helpful, this is where I would say you definitely want to start. So let's start with Barbarian Path of Wild Magic. First off, our basic description here. Many places in the multiverse abound with beauty, intense emotion, and rampant magic. I am straight up just reading from the Path of Wild Magic description here. The Feywild, the upper planes, and other realms of supernatural power radiate with such forces and can profoundly influence people. As folk of deep feeling, barbarians are especially susceptible to these wild influences, with some barbarians being transformed by the magic. So, tell me about Barbarian Path of the Wild Magic and what makes it perfect for a Feywild adventure.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the bane of barbarians, where it's not so much like the weakness, but more so of the Batman sort of villain character, where they're born into the Feywild, they're molded by it. They didn't say the material plane until they're a man and all that kind of stuff. But so they have this wild magic table where there's chaotic things that can happen, and luckily a lot of them are positive. shadow tendrils lash around you. You know, each creature that have a choice, you can see must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or take damage, and like you can teleport, and all these different things can happen. You know, because in the Feywild, my mind as a dungeon master always goes to like indirect approaches when it comes to combating party members, so illusions or charms, trickery, what have you. So having this path of the like wild magic barbarian at your side offers that chaos as well. So the dungeon master themselves gets tripped up over what your party members like. You can't predict what they're going to do. So it's a great class to have. Yeah.
I love that. So this is the Wild Surge comes at 3rd level on the Path of Wild Magic feature. The magical energy roiling inside you, sometimes roiling inside you, sometimes erupts from you. When you enter your rage, roll on the Wild Magic table to determine the magical effect produced. I think the teleportation might be my favorite in terms of effect, although the shadowy actually the coolest is the flowers and vines temporarily growing around you.
Yes.
That's just flavor. It's delicious. Any tips for somebody running their first wild magic barbarian?
I would just say like lean into sort of the chaos of it, you know, like obviously with this character you have that trade of you don't have total control over your character and what's going to happen to them, but that's okay because it also gives you a lot of extra features that a lot of people don't have, especially barbarians, you know, in this aspect where they usually just swing their sword multiple times and hope for the best, whereas you are teleporting, you know, sprouting flowers and all this kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool, yeah. So I hopefully your party members will be like very forgiving for your shenanigans that will happen. Yeah.
Well, and ideally, if you're spending time together growing along that path, you could have some very fun, like, when this effect kicks in for you, I will team up with this move, but we'll have to wait for random chance to make it happen. That sounds very fun to play into as a party dynamic.
Exactly. Later on, they get more control over that chaos, so it's like it's good. It has a payoff, you know.
So next on the list, we have Clerics of the Trickery domain. And you have already alluded to the fact that while it's easy to think about the terms of the uncontrollable nature side of the Feywild, but
Yes.
also this illusion side, this deception side. Tell us about Trickery domain for clerics.
Yeah, so the good thing about this article is that I had to research every single subclass of D&D 5th edition in order to find these like cool ones. So when I came to Cleric, I was like, oh my god, I didn't even know this existed, and this is like a really cool domain because it allows you to invoke duplicity and create illusions of yourself and everything, and various other like modify memory, disguise self, pass without trace, which you usually think of like wizards or sort of like different other characters having these abilities, but a cleric having it and worshiping as sort of like neutral, sometimes chaotic neutral god is like really good to have at your side while navigating this the Feywild where anything can happen. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you have a favorite feature from the Trickery domain cleric?
I think it would be invoke duplicity. Just being able to create like illusions of yourself helps out like tremendously when it comes to depending. Like if I was a player in my own game, there would be threats around every single corner. So having an imaginary like person be able to walk through to catch all the heat before I did, then would be good. Especially Pass Without Trace is really good as well. Yeah.
And I love the idea of Pass Without Trace not just being a product of your physical skill, but somehow of your intellect and your capacity for deception. Because honestly, it makes me think that a cleric is sitting there like with fake shrubbery all around them, being like, ha ha ha, you can't tell I'm
ghillie
here.
suit, yeah. Exactly. It's so good.
Would you have any tips for someone who is playing their first Trickery domain cleric? Maybe a role play tip for how you would approach that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to these, pretty much all of these subclasses, it's good to think like outside of the box because you're already going to be in various situations where nothing is normal and everything is random and everything. So it's nice to like because even when we think of clerics, we think of them as like good and law-abiding and always there to help people. But of Trickery domain, who knows what can happen with them? So definitely lean more into that aspect and think of what more neutral things you could do to bypass whatever shenanigans may unfold. Yeah.
I love the description for this one as well, of course. Gods of trickery, such as Tamura, Bishaba, Oldamara, the Traveler, Garl Glittergold, and Loki, hard to read that whole list all at once, are mischief makers and instigators who stand as a constant challenge to the accepted order among both gods and mortals. They're patrons of thieves, scoundrels, gamblers, rebels, and liberators, which sounds like a great Feywild party as far as I'm concerned. Their
Yes.
clerics are a disruptive force in the world, puncturing pride, mocking tyrants, stealing from the rich, freeing captives, and flouting hollow traditions. They prefer subterfuge, pranks, deception, and theft rather than direct confrontation. But you're still going to get access to things like Dispel Magic and Dimension Door, and I love, like, Polymorph obviously has a lot of great possibilities for a cleric of a trickster god, and it fits very well within the idea that, like, a cleric ought to be shaped by the different qualities of the god that they have chosen, and those are going to have many, many different compelling aspects. Obviously, the inclusion of Loki in this list should be a boon to the imagination of players everywhere, I would say.
Exactly.
Next up, we have, I love this pick. Tell us what might make the Druid Circle of Dreams a good one for adventuring in the Feywild.
Yeah, so this is a really cool one because it has direct ties to the Feywild itself, you know, because it's like a polar opposite of the trickery domain, because trickery domain isn't quite like Fey, you know, but this one is like drowning in it. So it's really cool to be able to combat things you're going to face with it, because with the Balm of the Summer Court, it like gives you a pool of dice you can use as a bonus action to restore your hit points to another creature.
That's the second
like
level feature. You become imbued with the blessings of the Summer Court. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That was what you just said, but I got excited.
No, you're good. I love this. Like I said, when I had to write this article, I reviewed a bunch of subclasses. So I was like, oh my god, that existed this whole time? Because I'm usually the dungeon master, never the player. So it's like, whoa. So it's like really, really
I
good.
didn't know you had forever DM situation.
Yes, absolutely. Since 2008. Yep. So it's pretty good to like see what other players. So I can hope and dream that one day I'll get to play these. But it's good stuff. Yeah.
It's I've been very much the opposite, where I've gotten to create and create and create, and I only have a few years of dungeon mastering under my belt, and it's so interesting the way it changes the things that jump out at you about play, like the sections that you go straight for. So I still have I go straight for the typical names section, where I'm like, this is the only way I understand the various species and races of the world, is to just be like, how do you talk to each other? And that's because I came into this as a player. But I love the hearing from folks coming at it in the other direction, and I hope that you get a chance to roll up many, many of these varieties. And now I want to actually be like, how would you as a DM deal with, how would you as a DM deal with the Barbarian Path of Wild Magic?
See, that's hard, because if I was approached by a player who had that, that's what would like be weird, you know? Because I'm like, oh, you got to do riddles in order to get past this, and they're like, no, I'm just gonna teleport, like, you know, randomly or whatever, and like, so it'd be really good if I was a dungeon master for a Feywild campaign. There would be a lot of hazardous terrain, a lot of illusions, a lot of charming, and a lot of like subtle skill checks to be able to, instead of directly punishing them with like damage and everything, it would be more so of that sort of roundabout way of messing with the players and everything. So these are all cool because they bypass a lot of that.
All right, how would you as a DM deal with the Cleric Trickery domain?
For Cleric of Trickery domain, that's also a very hard one, because that directly counters everything that I would do. So it's like countering illusions with illusions, and like, you know, lies and deception with more lies and deception, to the point where it's like, what is it, like like the Departed, you know, where you don't know who's telling the truth and who's really all that kind of stuff. So a lot of passive perception checks, which is very difficult as Dungeon Master, because you got to check that for all of your creatures, and like passive insight as well to see if you can do that. So yeah.
Excellent. And how would you deal with the Druid Circle of Dreams, which we're going to get into right now? Druids who are members of the Circle of Dreams hail from regions that have strong ties to the Feywild and its dreamlike realms. The Druid's guardianship of the natural world makes for a natural alliance between them and good aligned Fey. These druids seek to fill the world with dreamy wonder. Their magic mends wounds and brings joy to downcast hearts, and the realms they protect are gleaming, fruitful places where dream and reality blur together and where the weary can find rest. I really love the 14th level feature for this one. At 14th level, the magic of the Feywild grants you the ability to travel mentally or physically through dreamlands. When you finish a short rest, you can cast one of the following spells without expending a spell slot or requiring material components: Dream, with you as the messenger, Scrying, or Teleportation Circle. And there's a special usage attached to that teleportation circle. So I love it's about communication and really lends itself to teamwork and has this otherworldly flavor. So what do you like about the Druid Circle of Dreams, or how would you use it in a game?
Yeah, so for this one, this was definitely like a defensive sort of like druid to have in your party to give you that, especially Hearth of the Moonlight and Shadow, where it gives you that total cover, and that way your party members can like rest and have a little bit of like downtime to hopefully have a long rest. If not so, then the short rest to be able to get back some hit points and everything, especially with that.
I'll just fill in the Hearth of Moonlight and Shadow is the 6th level feature for this druid. Home can be wherever you are. During a short or long rest, you can invoke the shadowy power of the Gloaming Court to help guard your respite. At the start of the rest, you touch a point in space and an invisible 30-foot radius sphere of magic appears centered on that point. Total cover blocks the sphere, and you get bonuses inside it and protection from being discovered outside it. So you get a little camping shell to go along with you. As you travel around. And that's, sorry, for those who might not yet have their Circle of Dreams Druid materials.
Exactly, yes, because even like getting into the Feywild is, a random portal that you could accidentally walk through and suddenly you're there, and it's usually a very big plot hook that's like, oh my god, how do we get out of here? We got to figure out a way. So when you're like deep into maybe hostile territory, unknown territory, it's good to have that like sanctuary where you can just chill out and be able to just calm down and know that you're going to be safe, unless someone has tremor sense, then it's like terrifying. Yeah.
And I should be asking, when I ask my DM questions, not just how you would deal with, but of course, deal with is a two-sided coin for DM. You want to be able to challenge your players, but you also want to set them up for cool moments. So how would you deal with challenge and or set up for cool moments your Druid Circle of Dreams?
Yeah, so when I dungeon master, I always like to be neutral. So I create my adventure, and I don't quite consider what the players have created themselves, unless it's like a narrative reason where they have a mortal enemy that knows they're coming, and then they account for what they can do and all that kind of stuff. That way, when they come to play, it's going to be a situation where they have to combat what I created, and I have to combat what they created. For a Circle of Dreams, though, it's definitely going to be more sentry type monsters and creatures, whether it be, magical wards on the ground that they accidentally activate, or like I said, tremor sense or something like that they can do it, or even going into does it protect against like night hags going into dreams or anything like that? I don't know if it does. Dexterity, I think it's just physical. Let me see here. Yeah, so it should be like, so it protects them physically, but it doesn't protect them, in their dreams or anything like that. So there's some vulnerability that I could potentially account for. But yeah, so it's like, it's good. Yeah.
And I love that. So your personal DM approach is of course, you don't want to make people feel like, oh, you built a cool thing and I built a cool thing proof situation, because that can just be frustrating for everybody. But it is fun to sort of look for opportunities in play. I think I would really enjoy, I have never DM'd for a Circle of Dreams Druid, but I think I would really enjoy watching what they would do with their dream and their scrying power, just because that would sort of like communication inside the party. While it can be frustrating, can also be a really fun sort of like, oh, nice job getting the message to the person who's behind enemy lines,
Exactly. Yeah. It's like really fun. I love. Yeah.
No, what were you going to say?
I love all these subclasses because they add something unique. It's a druid, but this is like a totally different druid than some other druid or anything like that. So it's like one other one I want to mention is the Circle of the Shepherd, only because you get to summon a unicorn at some point. So it's like I saw that and I was like, I need to play that. If I ever get to play it, that's what I'm going to spend my my yearly player
Important note.
session.
And that one
Exactly.
gets you. Oh, yes. And as you mentioned in your article, that one gets you Speech of the Woods, which will add
Yes.
Sylvan to your list, which
Which
could come quite in handy.
exactly, yeah.
At second level, you gain the ability to converse with beasts and many fae. So, don't leave home without these. And next up on our list is the Paladin Oath of the Ancients. Now, this is a classic subclass. The Oath of the Ancients is as old as the race of elves and the rituals of the druids, sometimes called Fey Knights. Green Knights or Horned Knights, paladins who swear this oath cast their lot with the side of the light in the cosmic struggle against darkness because they love the beautiful and life-giving things of the world, not necessarily because they believe in principles of honor, courage, and justice. They adorn their armor and clothing with images of growing things, leaves, antlers, or flowers to reflect their commitment to preserving life and light in the world. Tell me about the Oath of the Ancients Paladin and what makes it a good fit.
Yeah, so this is literally my favorite paladin subclass. Like, this is the one that's on my list that I want to play. Because like it reminds me of the Green Knight from like all the legends and everything, where it's of nature, it's about nature to protect them, to foster them, everything like that. So their abilities also are like they go hand in hand with that. With Turn the Faithless, where you can use your channel divinity to utter ancient words that are painful for Fae and fiends to hear. And as an action, you can present your holy symbol, and each Fae or fiend within 30 feet of you has to make a save. Otherwise, they have to be turned for a minute until it takes damage. So that's like immediate counter to anything that you approach in the Fae, potentially.
I think I
So
love that that
it's
one also includes that it will force them to reveal their true form. I think
exactly.
is,
So
I
Hags,
mean,
who I also love, will be forced to reveal their shenanigans. Yeah, so it's good stuff.
and I love what you pointed out there, the way this particular subclass draws on a lot of archetypes out of various folklore and mythology, of
Yes.
sort of this intersection between serving an ideal and serving nature, and this variation that's like druid crossed with knight to make a particular kind of dedicated servant of nature,
Yeah.
with its own flavor. Um, how would you, and actually, I think Raynok X, thank you for your question. They had just asked us what is DeAngelo's favorite subclass from this article.
Yeah,
So
the Oath of the Ancients, absolutely. Like, oh my god, I because I never get to be a player, I always make up character sheets and like wish that one day. So one of them is legit, that Lafayette, that Oath of the Ancients Paladin one day. But yeah, so I absolutely love this class and everything that comes along with it. Granted, it works best in the Feywild, but there's a lot of other situations that it could work on in the regular world. With, I believe it's one of its abilities allows you to sort of like bind your target using like vines and what have you to ensnare them. Yeah, rather than just dealing damage, which like especially if you're more tactical of a player, or if your dungeon master is more tactical, that can help to counter them, or stop damage dealers from getting behind your lines and getting to that cleric or wizard or something. Yeah.
and you have mentioned using terrain to your advantage several times in talking about planning for the Feywild, which I think is really
Yes.
smart because depending on what your group's play style is, those like environmental hazards can make for a really fun way to mix up combat and tactics, especially if you're sort of like, we all know our moves, we all know our positions, everybody stand here, and then when you're like, just
Yes.
kidding, you're in a bog, good luck. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Mm,
because I started with fourth edition, and fourth edition was all about tactics, like all grid based and everything. So my mind immediately reverts back to that. So it's fun to have these classes that can help hinder enemies, because outright doing damage is fun, but like being able to mess with the monsters and hinder them is like always super cool. Yeah.
I like, I also a fan of fourth. Fifth is my favorite
Oh,
edition,
nice.
but picked up
Yeah.
a lot of things that I love and keep from the fourth edition days.
Yeah.
All right, next up on our list, I loved this next section because you had sort of two strong candidates for this next one. If you're
Yes.
playing a ranger and you might be heading to the Feywild, what are some things you might want to consider for the Feywild?
So For the Horizon Walker, like that's my outright the one I love, because it was actually our like Michael's. I don't know if I could mention his name or whatever, but like it
Of
was
course, Michael's
Michael
part of our
Jarvis's
content team, and of
suggestion.
course, a
Yes.
lot of everybody putting their heads together when we do these things.
Yeah, so it was Michael's suggestion, and I was like, "What is this Horizon Walker? Let's see how cool it is." And I checked it out. I was like, "Oh, dang, that's like really cool," because they're able to know where portals are, and that's particular for the Feywild. You know, granted, it's planar portals, so any portal going to whatever plane, so you can know when an invading army is like where they're coming through, or like if that way you can prevent mortals from going through accidentally to somewhere else they should be going to, and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things about the Horizon Walker that I love and adore, particularly Ethereal Step. But like, there's a lot of things about them. Yeah.
So we have a Detect Portal is a 3rd level feature for the Horizon Walker Ranger. At 3rd level, you gain the ability to magically sense the presence of a planar portal. As an action, you detect the distance and direction to the closest planar portal within 1 mile of you. You can do this once per short or long rest. And of course, it links back to the planar travel section in Chapter 2 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I love that to me, that unofficially makes it part of Feywild lore, because that's where we have our Feywild lore. Let me check my memory, because I'm just going off of remembering reading it again recently. But yeah. The Feywild lore literally appears right around the planar explanations and travels in the Dungeon Master Guide, which means I think the Horizon Walker absolutely counts as a canon Feywild appropriate
Yeah,
subclass. They guard the world against threats that originate from other planes or that seek to ravage the mortal realm with otherworldly magic. They seek out planar portals and keep watch over them, venturing to the inner planes and the outer planes as needed to pursue their foes. I would say that might make this subclass a great story choice if you're getting a party together. And it can be tricky. You got to make sure you have enough time to run an intro like this. But you could have most of your group come together and encounter your Horizon Walker at the point where they're all going to need to team up,
yeah,
cross through, and like get back whatever came through the other side, or whatever lost kid wandered into the Feywild. I feel like you would have a lot of great ways to introduce your Horizon Walker Ranger, and get them to
yeah,
sort of tie into your party and go on the adventure. Mhm. But of
yeah.
course, there
It's like
is.
so good. Go for it.
There's another option for Rangers if we're looking at the way we've got little bits of Fey lore sprinkled throughout 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Do you have any particular thoughts on using the Fey Wanderer Ranger?
Yeah, so the Fey Wanderer is really, really cool. Because they're kind of like the Horizon Walker is more of a sort of tactical, like knowledge seeking sort of class and everything. But the Fey Wanderer has like dreadful strikes, which like outright sort of, does damage, and then that, Fey Wanderer magic allows them to get like, new spells and everything. So it's like really tapping into the Fey rather than just being aware of different portals and protecting, your homeland from it. So it's a more of like aggressive sort of Fey approach, which is always good when addressing the Feywild. So it's pretty cool, yeah.
And the spells you get for this one include things like Charm Person, Misty Step, Dimension Door, and these, as you'll notice if you've been watching through these subclasses, these are pretty consistent sort of Fey features to find when one of, from teleporting barbarians to um gosh, what was I gonna say? Oh, to the Dimension Door. Did the Druid Circle of Dreams have Dimension Door? I've got all my
I
notes.
think so. Let me scroll up.
I was thinking of the
Circle Tree?
Trickery Cleric.
Oh,
But
Trigger. Yeah.
sorry about that. But a lot of similar features that you will notice in these subclasses that can tie them together sort of thematically to what's going on with the
Yeah,
Feywild.
especially yeah, for the Fey Wanderer, they also get the Feywild gifts where their appearance like can change. And I live for those details, you know? So it's like the first one on that you have to roll it too to get it. So it's like illusionary butterflies flutter around you while you take a short rest. That alone would make me want to play this subclass. Just be like, yeah, I'm down for this. Especially if
Or
it's like a
smelling of
Goliath, you
cinnamon?
know?
Come on. Yeah.
Exactly,
Oh.
yeah. So it'd be so good, yeah.
The Goliath surrounded by butterflies is my new favorite image. Please play those characters.
Right?
Uh,
Yeah.
finally, let's see. Next on our list, we have one more. We couldn't conclude a discussion of failing subclasses without talking about one particular warlock patron who might or might not come calling to make a bargain with you. What can you tell us about the Archfey?
Yeah, so the warlock with the archfey is really cool because usually when we think of patrons, we think of these like dark deities, that are all powerful and everything like that. But then this one could be more, chaotic or what have you, of that grants this mortal power, maybe even randomly or what have you, whatever you want your story to be, and it gives you so many awesome things to use and tap into, like Fey presence. At even level 1. They bestow upon you the ability to project the beguiling and fearsome presence of the Fae. That way you can spread it around, especially from the material plane. People may not even know that much about the Feywild, and then suddenly they get to experience it through this warlock, and who their patron is probably Willy Wonka or something like that, like in some weird form. Yeah.
So, if you're using Fey Presence as an action, you can cause each creature in a 10-foot cube originating from you to make a Wisdom saving throw against your Warlock spell save DC, and they will be charmed or frightened by you. Your choice. So, how would you play a Warlock Pact of the Archfey?
Yeah, I think I would. I think it would definitely be. Well, me, I always lean into the obnoxious, so they were definitely loud and very proud about, about the Feywild and everything like that. So if they don't have, butterfly wings themselves, then they'll probably craft them, and they'll just, go around town, preaching about how amazing the Feywild is, at least from an RP standpoint. From a like player standpoint, it would definitely be tapping into those sort of trickery or trickster like moves where you create the illusions, you're intimidating people and charming them and everything without having to directly get into conflict, because warlocks always for me as a dungeon master, with dungeon master PTSD, it's always like massive damage. So as a warlock archfey, it would be cool to have one that where it's more of like the hindrance and sort of routes and all that kind of stuff, so it'd be good. Yeah.
And of course, you have the ability as a warlock of the Archfey to start inflicting onto others the illusions that we're talking about as some of the dangers of the Feywild. At 14th level, you get Dark Delirium. You can plunge a creature into an illusory realm. As an action, choose a creature you can see within 60 feet of you. Yeah. It is charmed to frighten for 1 minute. And until it ends, the creature thinks it is lost in a misty realm, the appearance of which you choose. The creature can see and hear only itself, you, and the illusion. So we're in some full like Goblin King Labyrinth territory at this point.
That's a good one.
The world is your terrifying oyster at this point. Do you have any final thoughts on these incredible subclass choices for navigating the Feywild, or tips on using them?
I think these are really great because they sort of encourage the player to think outside of the box when it comes to playing, Dungeons and Dragons. Because normally, at least new players and maybe more experienced players will go for like what can do the most damage in the shortest amount of time. But these classes meant to explore outside of that, to be able to like, why don't you ensnare things, trick things, charm things, deal with your problems in different ways, which can lead to a more fulfilling experience, and that character is far more memorable than just the damage dealer, so that's what I would hope that players would be encouraged to explore these ones when they're navigating the Feywild, but obviously if you send your party, if your party is completely bards and they just go into the Feywild, that's also going to be a fun experience, so do what makes you happy. But yeah, definitely check out these classes, I would say.
Yes, and I would say a lot of these classes are still going to work well with, it's not like you're not going to be helpful in a fight. Your wild magic barbarian can still hold their own.
Yes.
And just one more question for the Forever DM. If you had a party and it was specifically these 6, and I know that you don't design for specific challenges, but like, what would you love to see them do?
Yeah, I think if all of these people were together, like these subclasses, I would love to see them, like, it would be sort of a how do you explain it? Like riddle upon riddle and puzzle upon puzzle, mechanically, and also like literal, riddles and everything like that, to see who can one up each other, which oftentimes the players outsmart me, but it is fun to have that sort of like, instead of trying to like outright kill the players with giant monsters, it's more of like bets and games of chance and all that kind of stuff that like leads to a fun experience, you know, that only these sort of like party members could handle, because they have access to this toolkit that is specialized in dealing with all of these indirect approaches like illusions and charms and everything. Yeah, so it's cool.
Excellent. So you might be a great candidate for, say, rival powerful figures inside the Feywild who are going to want the party to do their missions and compete with each other, and the party's going to have to sort of play them against each other and do sort of
Exactly.
outside the
Yeah.
box solutions like that. Cool, cool, cool. Well, I would love to hear other folks' thoughts on who they would bring in their perfect Swiss Army knife of a party for the Feywild, or how they would craft adventures that best fit these kind of players. So please let us know in the comments or on Twitter if you have faves from this list or ones that you would add to this list. And thank you so much, DeAngelo, for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Please come back and talk to us about more cool possibilities for D&D, and I hope that we can get you in a bunch of games. Although, thank you on behalf of all of the players for whom you have been forever DM.
Of
We
course.
appreciate it. I know we don't say it often enough, but DMs of the world, we salute you. You can, of course, pre-order the Wild Beyond the Witchlight to get ready for Feywild Adventure in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. You can pre-order it right now, and it's going to be with us very soon, and we're going to learn more about it this weekend at D&D Live, so I hope you'll all be checking that out like we will. There's lots of good stuff going on, and we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.